Deion Sanders and dominating the transfer portal have become synonymous. He does it again, and we're going to talk about it on today's episode of Locked On Buffs.
You are Locked On Buffs, your daily podcast on the Colorado Buffaloes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Buffs. I am your host, Kevin Bohr. Today's episode of Locked On Buffs is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. We're also brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day for free and available wherever you get your podcast. Brian, we all love free, and we all love Brian. Brian's our recruiting / transfer portal / Florida insider. He's our Southern Florida guy. We need him. Everyone needs a good South Florida guy, and we got the best. Brian, thank you for joining us. We're going to be talking about Coach Prime, the transfer portal, recruiting, and everything that's going on all before Christmas. So I hope your Christmas shopping is done because we got a lot to talk about.
It's not, but it is what it is.
Mine either. Got a few mall runs to make, which I'm begrudgingly hating myself for. But let's talk about the King of December. That's what I'm kind of calling Coach Prime because it seems as if he is doing his best roster acquisition during December. He's getting Jordan Seaton. He's getting all these transfers. He revamped his whole offensive line in the span of 5 days, and he's landed a couple more transfers before we recorded this. Actually, the Keaton twins from Kentucky, a linebacker and a quarterback. So he's got more help on the defense. He's got a backup for Shadur. Can you kind of talk about what makes Coach Prime so effective in the month of December?
It looks like it from the outside looking in that it's December. Trust me. There are no days off in recruiting, whether it's high school, junior college, or the portal. He's been talking to people for a long time in the recruiting game, even if it's not public. And then, of course, when somebody enters the portal, let's not kid ourselves. These kids have talked to, come on. Right. I know sometimes it's for months, but it's almost always the kid that initiates. That's the thing. Like they'll send out something to their 7-on-7 coach that knows Deion, or one of their former coaches that moved up the college ranks that knows whatever it is. So he has different ways to do that. I don't know how it exactly unfolds this fast, though. Even if you had a relationship with a guy, he must be really convincing on the phone. I've met him and talked to him just like in brief conversation about like a defensive back, but never had like a full recruiting conversation with him. But the dude must be incredible because they do flip kids pretty quick once it's like in the open. It truly is remarkable. But again, recruiting is nonstop. He does a lot of work with his staff year round to get to this point.
Yeah, I think he also kind of has the public perception part mastered because everyone's like, is he actually recruiting? We never see pictures of him doing in-home visits. Is he actually trying to get Jordan Seaton, for instance? Like Jordan Seaton, I think he pulled the wool over everyone's eyes. He announced a top 6 or 7, whatever the number was. Colorado wasn't one of them. He kind of had talked about Ohio State a lot. He visited Colorado. The last time we had spoken, Jordan Seaton had visited Colorado the week they had demoted their offensive coordinator, and no one had an answer for what they were going to do moving forward. And so it was like, okay, so Colorado's out of the Jordan Seaton sweepstakes. And then all of a sudden, he headlines their class. Can you kind of talk about what they're getting in Jordan Seaton, someone from your neck of the woods, and how he kind of started this whole run for Coach Prime? Because it literally went Jordan Seaton, lineman, tight end, wide receivers. They just landed Will Shepard yesterday from Vanderbilt, who's their top player in the portal, top 35 guy in the portal. So talk about Jordan Seaton, and then we'll dive into the transfers a little bit.
Here's the backdrop for Seaton. He played at IMG Academy. He's a kid from the East Coast originally, but IMG's in Bradenton. It's the boarding school that beats the bejesus out of just about everybody they play. He's their left tackle. One of the most skilled kids that I have seen at the high school level, regardless of position, just due to his mentality. Like you will not outwork Jordan Seaton. He went from like 320, 330, dropped down to like 295, got lean, put himself in the position to be the player that he is. And he takes his craft serious. In between series, he's always looking at the monitor, talking to other guys, his coaches. He's a perfectionist. He will have a chance to play wherever he goes, no matter what level it is. I think he'll eventually play in the NFL and play early. More technician than just pure athlete. I think he still needs to continue to develop his flexibility and all that like big guys do. But there's no doubt he has a chance to start for Colorado. They need help up front. I'm sure that was part of the reason that Prime was able to like, look, man, you got a chance here. I'm sure that was part of the pitch, and it should have been. And Seaton's not afraid of competition. He loves it. It's one of the reasons he went to IMG. So from talking to him, great kid, and it's somebody I think that Colorado fans will like. He's really well-spoken, a good guy.
Yeah, and he kind of kickstarted, like I said, what was a wild week. All of a sudden, it was like Jordan Seaton. I was like, okay, great. And then it was, okay, now we're gonna go out and land 5 portal linemen. All of them played and started at the FBS level. Got Tyler Johnson from Houston. You have Justin Mayers from UTEP. You have Yakiri Walker from UConn, who's going to come in and play center. And I had been saying all along, I think Colorado needed to go into the portal, bring in 5 to 7 linemen, because obviously I don't think you could have knowingly, based on what we saw this past year, I don't think you could have purposely started one of those 5 guys again unless they had like a tremendous spring ball. Like it just did not work out for Colorado. They gave up 56 sacks. Like there was no reason for any of those guys to be starting again. They could be backups, they could be reserves, but there was no reason for them to be starting. So he gets Tyler Johnson to go over the list again. Yakiri Walker, Matthew Bedford from Indiana, Khalil Benson from Indiana, Justin Mayers. And now all of a sudden they got some beef. And then they get some portal wide receivers. They're going to probably lose Xavier Weaver to the NFL draft. He was one of the guys that stood up on the stage that during their final game where they had like their senior night moment. And so I was kind of concerned who their priority receiver would be because I like Jimmy Horn. I think he gets in his head a little too much sometimes where he makes a mistake and it rattles him a little bit. Great speed, great everything else. I just feel like he takes himself out of the game. And then you have Travis Hunter. I have no clue what they're going to do with him moving forward. I feel like he should be on a pitch count. I get ridiculed every time I say this, but I don't think he should be playing 300 snaps a game. I think it's more obvious on defense when he's tired than it is on offense because there's receivers that no one's ever heard of all of a sudden going for 295 yards. So they go out and get Will Sheppard, and Will Sheppard is a Vanderbilt transfer, played 4 years, had one of his more productive years this past season. Can you kind of talk about what they're getting in Will Sheppard and what he could bolster this wide receiver corps with?
Well, to your point about Travis, and he's one of the twitchiest kids I've ever seen. I like to compare him to Allen Iverson. Who's the best high school player I ever saw live. If you can reduce Travis to I don't know which side of the ball they'll need more next year. That'll take care of itself. But if you could just take 20 snaps off of his resume just on offense by getting this kid, that helps. And he's a big kid that's got experience. I know it's Vanderbilt, but he's not got a lot of help around him, and he made plays.
Right.
Everybody knew they were trying to get him the ball. So in a way, him playing at Vandy is more important than if he'd have played at Georgia. Because at Georgia, they got other guys. They had a certain tight end that was good, etc. But at the same time, now what does he do when he moves to Colorado? Obviously, the spotlight is way bigger. And can he be a focal point so Travis or anybody else like Jimmy, or if they kind of balance it more? And I think they can, but this kid's really good. He did it against SEC comp. He's got the hands, he's got speed, he's got some size. Maybe they found their boundary guy. And then you can't key on Travis and Jimmy as much. I mean, that offense with Shedeur.
Yep.
I mean, bro, look out.
They also brought in Draylon Miller, he kind of gets overlooked. Great. He's a top 70 player, I think it is. And he's kind of like the quietest top 70 commitment you'll ever see just because it went 5-star, all the linemen, and then this. So they got Draylon Miller. They got Omarion Miller, who had some bright moments last year. But for those of you who aren't familiar with Will Sheppard, 6'3", from Louisiana, 47 catches this past year. 684 yards, 8 touchdowns, and that is with Vanderbilt having a revolving door of quarterbacks. It was
that was bad last
year. I think I got a text one week to play quarterback. I was in Nashville. They were like, "Are you free this weekend?" I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm down on Broadway. Sorry." But it's one of those things where Colorado has attracted a lot of talent, and they have a chance to continue to do so. They have a list of about 10 visitors, and we're going to talk about that when we come back. But first, I need to give you guys a word from our sponsors over at Game Time, because if you guys aren't familiar with Game Time, one, get out from under the rock you're living under, and two, go get yourself some great tickets. You shouldn't have to worry about when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Game Time is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. So if you want to take the guesswork out of buying tickets, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, go to Game Time, get the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. It's code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Okay, Brian, I have quite the list of names. So obviously, like I said at the top of the show, they landed the Keaton twins. One of them was a contributor for Kentucky. He was a starting or rotational linebacker. The other is a backup quarterback. But obviously, Colorado didn't have a lot of answers. Once Shedeur Sanders went down, they just had a couple freshmen, a walk-on, and it got pretty ugly pretty quick. But this list is extensive, and we're going to go through some of the bigger names. The one that stands out to me currently in Florida is Chris McClellan, the defensive lineman from Florida, 6'3", 320, SEC experience. And I talked about this a lot before the portal opened. A lot of people last year when they were talking about Colorado's transfer class were excited about the logo of who Colorado was landing. So Colorado lands an Alabama secondary member who didn't play. They landed a Tennessee defense lineman who didn't play. Now Colorado is pursuing guys who have played at the biggest stage, and Chris McClellan is one of them. Can you kind of talk about what he brings to the table?
He could play nose or he could play three tech. He's from Oklahoma originally. Young man that was a little bit under recruited, and Florida was smart to get after him, and his recruitment picked up a lot towards the end of his high school career. But man, he can play. He came in and made work real easy, real fast. And you can't find 320 guys that can move, man. If they get him, I mean, he's a plug and play guy. He could start at any SEC school. He has enough talent. And obviously, the girth is there. The only question is, how does Colorado? I don't know what Colorado plans to do legitimately next year. They're going to run 3-3-5, 4-3 combination, but I think he could play multiple spots there. I'm not saying he's a pure pass rusher or something, because 320 and a pass rusher don't really go together. But let's be honest, Colorado got run on too much this year in key moments. If they could have just changed it a little bit in a couple games, they go to a bowl game. You know, I mean, if you don't have D-line talent, especially like right there in the middle, that's just an ogre, that guy that just holds the point of attack and command a double team, you're not going to win a lot of games. And even though they're going to the Big 12, which is less competition, I mean, teams would, this roster they had this year, they would still just run at them. You need guys like McClellan.
Yeah, and Colorado lost their last game of the season against Utah, who's starting a JUCO quarterback who had never taken a snap at the college at the D1 level, and they lost to him because they literally just ran the ball the entire time. So, and a big fella like Chris, bring that beef, bring the thickness. Moving on, this is another name that stands out, Mike Lockhart from West Virginia. Not as big as Chris, 6'3", 308. He's someone who has Big 12 experience. He's someone who could come in like Chris. Realistically, any of these guys that they're bringing in could come in and play. Colorado's defensive line, it was a lot of rotational pieces. It's a lot of like, I think this guy would be better if he was playing, say, 70 snaps a game rather than all 130 defensive snaps or whatever it is. So these guys are the type of guys that Colorado needs. Coach Prime saw that. He said that he was building from the outside in last year, and now I think we're going from the outside or from the inside out. The next name, this is arguably the biggest name in the portal at the defense line spot. It is Chidozie Nwankwo. I'm hoping I'm saying that semi-closely. He's from Houston, 5'11", 295. He's kind of tied to whoever his defense line coach is at Houston. He wants to stay with him, which he was just rehired. So that kind of puts a wrench in things. But he's a big name, had some big production, and another guy that could play right away. They have Quincy Wiggins from LSU. Can you kind of talk about Quincy? Because that's another SEC talent who's played.
Here's the deal on him. I met him, and he's one of the freakiest guys I've ever seen. He played at Madison Prep in Baton Rouge, but he was a hooper until like his junior year of high school. He's really raw, but like his wingspan and his size and everything, like when I shook his hand, I didn't see mine. It's a good sign. Like he's freaking, he's a nice guy, but like zero body fat at 265. Like he had his shirt off when he was at a gym when he was working. I'm like, you're in high school? He looked like he was 25 years old. Like it was just insane. Things didn't work out at LSU, but that entire defense, I don't know what in God's name went on at LSU this past year. It's despicable. He's out of there. I don't know what else he's going to do with their defensive coordinator. They need to do something there too, but he's going to play somewhere. And you can't teach the 6'5.5", 6'6" frame, 270-ish. If he didn't play at Colorado, something's wrong. Because like we've both been saying here, it's not like the Buffs are just throwing out first-round picks out of the D-line. He would have a chance. Athleticism is through the roof, brother.
Yeah, and I think to kind of touch on what Brian's saying about the defense line not being where it needed to be, if you guys watch the Coach Prime documentary on Amazon Prime, the first, I think, episode or two, they focus on Bishop Thomas as like, this guy has the tools, the Florida State transfer. This guy has the tools. He's going to be the guy for us. And he had like 6 total tackles. I think he was more so used as a fullback when they would be in the red zone. They used him a lot there. And so So they just didn't have what they needed. They didn't have the beef. They didn't have the size, and now they're getting that. And so another name that's coming this weekend, Preston Hodge from Liberty, is a safety. Coach Prime kind of talked about wanting to bolster the secondary, which in the Big 12, for every team that likes to run the ball, there's a team that loves to air it out.
There's probably two.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of teams that like to air it out. And so having more secondary help doesn't hurt. And then we get to some very interesting names. One that'll make your ears perk up. Chris Brazel, I believe, is from Tulane, the 6'5", 195 pass catcher, can catch just about anything that comes his direction. He's kind of slim, at 195. And they're also bringing in Cordell Russell from TCU. So can you kind of talk about that wide receiver tandem?
Well, let's put it in perspective. Number one, you can't teach height. And They need somebody, again, opposite of Travis, no matter where the heck he's at. And Jimmy, and they're smaller guys in terms of their physique. But Travis, 6'1", something like that. They needed some more height that could get down the field. Mm-hmm. So the first kid, he's 6'5". Yeah. So you're trying to fit pieces. If you've got a boundary receiver where you can force that safety kind of lean in that way, that changes what you can do against Travis and Jimmy just in the screen game. Even if they know it's coming, that's annoying. Second part, I'll take anybody that had anything to do with the TCU program from last season, just to have that. Colorado didn't have a great year, especially the back half. They need some positive momentum. This is how you go through practice and all that. And then it's a kid that's got some skill too. So I would not be surprised if Deion targeted kids like Tulane. Obviously, has been very successful. I mean, what that guy did there before he went to Houston is phenomenal. You need kids with those kind of habits too, because there's a reason some of these kids are leaving Colorado for being there for a year. Not the right attitude. Tulane was a winning program. TCU is a winning program, etc. Keep that in mind. It's very, very important.
That's a great point, because Colorado, people get mad. They had a culture problem. They had an attitude problem. When your coach is questioning your identity and it's like week 10 of the season, not great. When you lose to Stanford after blowing a 29-point lead and your coach is questioning if you love football, also not great, not ideal. That's not a conversation. That's like a spring conversation to like weed out the guys that you don't want. Not a mid-season convo where it's like, guys, are we wanting to do this, or like should we go look at jobs? LinkedIn's always hiring. Like that's not something you want. And then they're also bringing in Walter Taylor, 6'7" quarterback from Vanderbilt. I doubt he's going to commit now because obviously they landed the Kentucky quarterback transfer, but you never know. More depth never hurts. When we come back, we're going to be talking about where Colorado kind of fits into the Big 12 with this revamped roster, this revamped everything. But first, a word from our sponsors over at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the most fun I've had, winning up to 25 times my money this football season. And now I can play during basketball season too. You just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on the projected stats, and place your entry. With the basketball season here, you can now pick a combo projection across football and basketball with a specials league, a league created specifically for combo projections that includes 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, you go LeBron James, Laker legend, and Taylor Swift's boyfriend Travis Kelce at 10.5 combo 3-pointers made plus receptions. You could also play with celebrities like Meek Mill and Andrew Schultz if you go to the community plays under the promos tab to view what they are doing and their entries and some of the biggest names in the PrizePick community each week. So if you want to get in on this PrizePick fun, go to prizepicks.com/lockedon and use code LockedOnCollege for $20 off go to for a first deposit match of up to $100. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, prizepicks.com, LockedOnCollege. LockedOnCollege is the code. You get up to $100 matched, and it's daily fantasy sports made easy. There's just so many great deals out here. I'm throwing them all together. Colorado is heading to the Big 12. They currently are ranking number 1 in the transfer portal, so they obviously currently have the best transfer portal class. They are the best recruiting program in the Big 12 as it stands right now. The Big 12 is kind of a down conference that was kind of headlined by Texas and Oklahoma recruiting-wise every year, and then the rest of the country or the conference would be like top class would be like 23 or something. So Coach Prime can obviously dominate recruiting. He can dominate the portal. Can he dominate the Big 12 if the development is there?
Well, that's something that's a possibility, but I think the first thing you have to look at, okay, Oklahoma and Texas are leaving. Obviously, those were the biggest guns. It's not negotiable.
Right.
What other team besides Colorado is coming in that you first looked at and you go, oh, there's one that's different than the other. Which one is that?
Yeah, that's either Arizona or Utah, and Utah has been the most successful to me.
Utah's coaching staff is phenomenal.
Right.
Arizona's coach is really good. He's going to look great in a Gators uniform in about a year. I'm just calling that now. Jeb Fish is a Florida Gator. That's where he went to school. But he's a good coach. but I don't know if they've got enough talent long term. If he would just stay there, I mean, I think the Arizona job could be great, but nobody ever stay. You know what I mean? It's kind of weird. But Utah is the team they got to compete with. What does Utah do? Like you mentioned a minute ago, we're going to run downhill.
Yep.
You know we're going to run downhill. We're going to do it anyway. Can you stop us? Colorado needs more pieces there, more development. With this talent, I think this is kind of the in-between year. But if he's trying to do this long-term and truly stay at Colorado, this is very important for him to get away from the portal a little bit and get some of these. Like Seton was a great start. I questioned what they could do until I saw him get elite kids in the trenches, not just skill guys. Like Deion's always going to get skill guys because he was a corner. I get the attraction. I remember Cormani telling me before he committed, like, that guy calls me every day. He's really trying to get me. He told me that. I'm like, okay, well, then he's legit, but you got to get linemen too. Now that he's getting guys like Seton, if he gets McClellan, maybe he needs to get a couple of high school kids that are big-time D linemen to commit and sign. Then they can do that. Because, I mean, I don't think anybody can question he can get players from the portal. If they do, they're not paying any attention.
Right.
You've got to get more linemen from the high school ranks. Then, yeah, they could. Because the Big 12 is going to be arguably the worst and probably the worst of the Power 4. Let's just get to it. There's no more Power 5. It's Power 4.
Right.
Why couldn't they be a team that finishes consistent in the top 3 or 4 of that division or that league and possibly goes to playoff? I mean, it's not hard to recruit to Boulder. It's beautiful. So why not?
Yeah, and honestly, all you got to do is win the conference and you're in the playoff for the future years. Also, I have one omission, so the Texas Tech fans don't throw tortillas at me. Texas Tech currently has a top class. They're number 21, Colorado's number 23. I imagine Colorado will surpass them. Don't throw your tortillas. Hold the tortillas, please. But the thing about the Big 12 that stands out to me is I was on Locked on Big 12 yesterday, and Drake asked me, who in the Big 12 do you think can run the conference? And I was like, I don't think there's a single Big 12 team currently, maybe Kansas State, but they're always the bridesmaid, never the bride.
They just lost their OC too.
They did. Colin Klein is now at Texas A&M, and he was their quarterback, their best quarterback in program history, arguably. So they have a lot of things to work out there. And it's like, who in the Big 12 stands out as a team that can consistently clinch one of the top 2 spots? And I was like, Oklahoma State, maybe, but Mike Gundy's kind of politicking for every SEC job that opens up every single year. He wrote a letter to Florida, I think it was 2 years ago, where he wanted to be the head coach of Florida. Like, he is always there. And then I'm like, Kansas, but I feel like Lance Leopold is going to be a head coach somewhere else eventually. And I just don't trust them with Jalen Daniels always being injured. And so then it's like TCU. I have no idea what to make of them. They were in the championship last year. This year, they made everyone think that Colorado was going to win the championship after week 1. It was one of those things where we don't know what TCU is. And then you get Texas Tech. The Big 12 was supposed to run through Lubbock this year, and it didn't. And so they have a great portal class. They have obviously a really good recruiting class. Are they the ones? And I don't think so. So I look at Colorado, and it comes down to development to me, for me at least, because they're going to recruit. Like you said, they're going to get the skill guys. Getting the linemen is always going to help, and that's going to be a challenge for them. But do they develop? They haven't really had to develop anyone because they just inherited a bunch of other basically finished products and just adapted them to their style. But can they develop recruits and transfers and kind of get them headed in the right direction? Because I think Colorado could at least be a top 3 school in the Big 12 every year if all things go right.
Utah is the safest pick. Colorado is the intriguing pick. Kansas State, I won't bet against their coaching staff. I mean, they have done a tremendous job. You absolutely. A wild card is Iowa State. They haven't trended as well lately,
right?
But they've got a pretty good staff. And then, of course, until Jeb heads to Gainesville, I'm going to put Arizona in that mix. I'm not buying Texas Tech until they prove it. Everybody always talks about them because they're fun to watch on offense. Mm-hmm. But in football, I don't know if you've heard about this. They play defense too.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And
didn't know the concept.
Not all the schools in the Big 12 do. Texas Tech usually isn't one of them. Although they've had some good defenses lately. They've been up and down. But that program is just never consistent. I don't like putting them at the top. They don't get enough ball players that I'm going to watch on Friday nights. They just don't. Mm-hmm. So they need to hit the portal. They're kind of like Colorado. And ironically that you mentioned them, you're going to see Colorado battle Tech for a lot of kids from the Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma area that go to a school and they go somewhere else. you'll see a lot of those battles moving forward.
Not that this is Locked On Red Raiders or anything, but they did get Josh Kelly from Washington State. They did get a
Good
Florida
player.
transfer. So they're in the mix out there. They're getting some guys. The Red Raiders are trending up. It's kind of shocking. Maybe they're having a premium NIL tortilla deal. I don't know. We don't know what's going on over there in Lubbock, but we know what's going on in Boulder, and we'll have you guys covered every single day here on Locked On Buffs. I appreciate you guys for tuning in and making us your first listen every single day. We just hit 4,000 subscribers, so a round of applause to us and a round of applause for you guys for supporting. Brian, tell the people where they could find you, because you are covering everything recruiting.
It is pretty wild. I don't know how to explain it, but I work on numerous Fan Nation sites, and I've lost track of how many podcasts I've done on the Locked On Network. I even run the Seminoles podcast, Locked On Seminoles. I mean, it's a blast. But if you go to FB Scout _Florida, you will find recruiting news on Twitter. I guarantee.
He's got it covered. If you like college football, there's a 99.9% chance that Brian has talked about a team that you follow. And I'm the same way over at Athlon. If you like college football, there's a 99.9% chance I'm writing about your team. So make sure to check us out. I hope you guys have a great day and a great weekend. I will see you guys on Monday.